After studying this module, you shall be able to know the genesis of APDRP, learn implementation and achievements of JNNURM, identify comparison of APDRP and JNNURM. There is a growing consensus among policy formulators that the private-public partnership mode holds the key to the development of infrastructure in the country. In the past, the government used to dominate infrastructure space with hardly any private sector participation. However, times have changed. The government is now focusing on a public-private partnership model for infrastructure creation. A host of private sector construction players have invested in infrastructure sector, mainly through the BOT model, which is the build, operate, transfer. PPP has been in vogue for over a decade in the country, and there exists copious literature on what constitutes PPP in terms of ownership of assets and responsibility, operation and maintenance. There exists some opaqueness on how O&M responsibilities should be transferred from the public domain to the private and what residual responsibilities remain for the public institutions to shoulder. Public institutions' financial responsibility also remains clouded, as there is a general perception that the private sector can run the facility profitably right from the beginning. The Accelerated Power Development and Reform Program APDRP and the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission JNNURM are two prominent centrally sponsored schemes with sector-specific focus on the power sector and urban infrastructure respectively. Their success critically depends on PPP. The genesis of APDRP. The financial health of SEBs became a major cause for concern once their losses reached staggering proportions at 26,000 crores during 2000-2001, which was equivalent to about 1.5% of GDP. Accelerated Power Development Program, which is APDP, was undertaken in the year 2000-2001 as a last means to restore the commercial viability of the power distribution sector. Since incentive financing linked to the reform process was proposed to be integrated with the existing investment programs to achieve commercial viability of state electricity boards or power utility, the original APDP was rechristened the Accelerated Power Development and Reform Programs in 2002-2003. The APDP was a scheme with diffused focus that sought to achieve improvements in too many things at the same time: generation, transmission and distribution. Its emphasis was on inputs and projects as opposed to outcomes. The program made heavy demands on the center in terms of project selection, and monitoring was to be monitored by the Power Finance Commission. Many projects awaiting clearance under other schemes of PFC and the Rural Electrification Corporation REC found their way into the APDP. Disbursements linked to signing of MOUs were ineffective. State governments happily flouted rules, including the critical ones such as creating a ring-fenced account for APDP funds. The failure of the APDP led to the adoption of more focused measures that were likely to achieve the objectives of sustainable power provisioning. Drawing upon the experience of Odisha's privatization model, the reforms were planned in two phases. The first phase was to improve internal functioning by metering, transparency of processes, smooth information exchange and so on. And the second phase was to achieve structural and regulatory changes by privatization of distribution, multi-year regulation, abolition of a single buyer model, among other elements. The main objectives of APDRP are improving financial viability, reduction of T&D losses to around 10%, improving customer satisfaction, increasing reliability of power supply, improving quality of supply, adopting systems approach with MIS, bringing transparency through computerization. The APDRP scheme has two main components, investment and incentives. Investment component. For purpose of strengthening and upgradation of sub-transmission and distribution network, the center provides additional central assistance in the form of grants to the state utilities to the tune of 25% of project cost. For availing funds under the investment component of APDRP, project proposals are prepared by state utilities in the form of detailed project reports, which are reviewed by the advisor cum consultants and then considered and sanctioned by APDRP Steering Committee on merit. APDRP is an instrument to leverage distribution reforms in the state. Therefore, priority is given to projects from those states which have committed themselves to a time-bound program of reforms as elaborated in the Memoranda of Understanding and Agreement and are making progress on those commitments. An incentive equivalent to 50% of the actual cash loss reduction by SEBs or utility is provided as grant. The year 2000-2001 is the base year for the calculation of loss reduction in subsequent years. The cash losses are calculated net of subsidy and receivables. During the 10th plan period, which is from 2002 to 2007, planned outlay of APDRP under the two components was rupees 40,000 crores. Rupees 20,000 crores for strengthening and upgradation of sub-transmission and distribution network under the investment component, and grants of rupees 20,000 crores to the states for reduction in cash losses by SEBs or utilities under the incentive component. All states have signed MOUs with the Ministry of Power to take steps to undertake distribution reform in a time-bound manner. Subsequently, 25 states have constituted State Electricity Regulatory Commissions, SERCs, and 21 have issued orders towards rationalizing tariff structures. States are now more committed to subsidy payments to utility. The analysis of financial outcomes indicates that APDRP did not succeed in achieving its objectives. In its primary objective of reducing technical and commercial losses to less than 15%, APDRP failed miserably. The aggregate technical and commercial losses continued to remain unacceptably high at over 35%, and they range from 18 to 62% across states. In terms of investment component, against the target of 40,000 crores, that is 20,000 by the Government of India plus 20,000 by the state and SEBs, projects worth rupees 17,034 crores were sanctioned. 42.5% of planned outlay, against which the Government of India released 7,203.44 crores. The actual expenditure was little and stood at rupees 10,810.54 crores. That is 27% against planned outlay. The final utilization figure also indicates that Government of India has released funds, but state governments have not added their share and many projects are incomplete. In terms of the incentive component, it was envisaged that state and SEBs would wipe out losses of rupees 40,000 crores, which was securitized, and claim 20,000 crores as an incentive grant from the Government of India. By end of March 2007, rupees 1,749.03 crores were distributed as incentive grant, as SEBs had succeeded in reducing their losses by a mere 5,252 crores, just 13% of the planned loss reduction. Not surprisingly, APDRP is being revised again. Though the objective of the revised APDRP remains that of reduction in high TNC losses of state utilities, 38, it has been officially acknowledged by the government that the original APDRP, under which 7,200 crores have already been released, did not succeed in cutting down losses significantly. Experts blamed too many preconditions for the failure of the program, under which states were supposed to unbundle their utility, set up state electricity regulatory commissions, and ensure 100% metering. The revised program, on the other hand, lays stress on only one parameter, that the states have to improve their collection efficiency, irrespective of whether they have unbundled their boards or whether they have set up a regulator or not. JNNURM. The JNNURM, which is the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission scheme, was announced on 3rd December 2005 for a duration of 7 years, 2005 to 11, with a plan outlay of 50,000 crores as an ACA to state governments for 63 selected cities, which included 35 cities with 10 lakh plus population, state capitals, and 28 special cities. GOI has also formulated the Urban Infrastructure Development Scheme for small and medium towns, UIDSSMT, on a similar lines, with rupees 50,000 crore planned outlay as an ACA to state governments for over 4,000 agglomerations identified as small or medium towns. In this paper, we shall evaluate JNNURM only. The JNNURM has the following objectives. 1, to ensure that cities generate outcome-oriented proper plans through participatory processes. 2, to pool all relevant GOI programs or schemes into a centralized mission fund which can be enhanced. 3rd, to use the mission funding to focus on supporting services for the poor. 4th, to link fund disbursement with performance parameters. 5, to secure effective linkages between asset creation and asset management so that the infrastructural services created in the cities are not only maintained efficiently but also become self-sustaining over time. 6, to develop cities in a well-planned manner to include semi-urban areas, outgrowths, and urban corridors so that urbanization is dispersed. Infrastructure projects admissible under JNNURM are: 1, water supply and sanitation, including desalination plants where necessary, sewerage and solid waste management. 3rd, hospital waste management. 4th, laying, improvement, widening of arterial, subarterial roads and bridges to remove transport bottlenecks. 5, urban transport and construction and development of bus and truck terminals. 6th, environmental improvement and city beautification schemes. 7th, construction of working women's hostel, marriage halls, old age and destitute children's home, night shelters with community toilets. 8, street lighting. 9, slaughterhouses. 10, civic amenities like playgrounds, stadiums, community halls. Financing of the project under the JNNURM is proposed in a manner which fulfills the JNNURM objectives and promotes PPPs in the creation of urban infrastructure. In order to be eligible for assistance, respective ULBs and state governments have to undertake a set of mandatory reforms. In case of ULBs, such reforms include full O&M cost recovery over 5 years, accrual accounting, e-governance, pro-poor budgeting as important elements. Similarly, mandatory reforms for states include repeal of Urban Land Ceiling and Regulation Act, which is ULCRA of 1976, reform of rent control laws, independent regulators for urban services, and so on. In addition, states and ULBs are required to implement any 5 optional reforms in the first year, which include implementation of voluntary retirement scheme, VRS bylaws for rainwater harvesting and computerization of land title system. Each assistance seeking ULB would also be required to prepare a city development plan based on rapid city assessment. The RCA is expected to help the ULB to A, develop a vision for its city, B, ascertain the gap between infrastructure and investment, and C, set out priorities, sequencing and timelines for undertaking various reforms and investment. While preparing its CDP, the ULB is expected to pay particular attention to 3 key aspects, namely delivery of services, governance and financing, and identification of investment projects for assistance under the mission The CDP and DPRs for proposed investment shall be used to formulate a Memorandum of Agreement or MOA between ULB, state and the centre. The JNNURM strategy for successful attainment of schemes mainly consists of three elements. One, city development plan, a vision document that defines where the city wishes to go, lays down alternative routes for getting there. Second, detailed project reports. These provide detailed account of technology selected, engineering plans, estimates of quantity, implementation plans, social and environmental impact analysis, performance benchmark, financial plans, and so on for specific projects admissible under the JNNURM. Through DPRs, spheres and sectors for support are defined, project fit with CDP framework is established, financial and technical viability of the project is evaluated, a clear financing structure for each project is presented. Reform plan with time frames. JNNURM is not a free lunch. Assistance for investment is contingent upon the attainment of various mandatory and optional reforms by ULBs and respective state government. The reforms to be undertaken are as follows. First, mandatory reforms from ULB. Under this, accrual-based double-entry system of accounting, introduction of system of e-governance using IT applications like GIS and MIS for various services provided by ULBs, reform of property tax with GIS so that it becomes a major source of revenue, levy of reasonable user charges, full recovery of O&M costs, operational and maintenance cost, internal earmarking within local body budgets for basic services to the urban poor, and provision of basic services to urban poor include improved housing, security of tenure at affordable prices, water supply, sanitation, ensuring delivery of other existing universal services of the government for education, health and social security. These works must be given a minimum of 35% share of the funds going to be spent under JNNURM. B. Mandatory reforms for state governments. Implementation of the 74th Constitution Amendment Act 1992, enactment of Public Disclosure Law, enactment of Community Participation Law, assigning or associating elected ULBs with the city planning function, repeal of the ULCRA 1976, reform of rent control laws balancing the interests of landlords and tenants, rationalization of stamp duty to bring it down to not more than 5% within the next 5 years. C. Optional reforms. States and ULBs are any two optional reforms to be undertaken per year. Revision of bylaws to streamline approval process for construction of buildings, development of sites, etc. Simplification of legal and procedural framework for conversion of agricultural land for non-agricultural purposes, introduction of property title certification system, earmarking at least 20 to 25% of developed land in all housing projects, both public and private agencies, for economically weaker sections, lower income group, category with system of cross subsidization, introduction of computerized process of registration of land and property, revision of bylaws to make rainwater harvesting and adoption of water conservation measures mandatory in all buildings, bylaws for reuse of recycled water, administrative reforms, structural reforms encouraging PPP. Implementation and achievement of JNNURM. Since JNNURM has just completed 2 years of its planned 7-year project life, any conclusion drawn about its success or failure would be premature. Still, this analysis is important to project the trajectory of its future performance and to identify early warning signals. The following paragraph states the achievement till July 2007. For the year 2005-06, budget provision was 500 crores. For 6-7, the Government of India provided 2,500 crores for urban infrastructure, 1,000 crores for BSUP component. For the year 2007-08, Government of India has made provision of 2,805 crores for urban infrastructure and 1,322.34 crores for BSUF. To qualify for JNNURM assistance, the ULB must first and foremost prepare and submit a CDP. All ULBs, which are 63 cities, have prepared and submitted CDPs to MUD for assistance under the JNNURM. MUD has already appraised 59 CDPs and 4 CDPs are under appraisal. But in case of mega cities like Mumbai and Kolkata, MUD has appraised CDP of main ULB, but there exist several ULBs and other portals which are in the process of formulating CDPs, as a result of which the investment figure is likely to be revised upward. In the second step involving negotiation of the reform agenda and then signing of the tripartite MOA, out of 59 CDPs appraised, in 54 cases reform agenda has been negotiated and MOA has been signed. Getting ULBs to prepare and submit CDPs, subsequently getting state governments and ULBs to agree on reform agenda in order to sign the tripartite MOA is a massive task and a commendable achievement on the part of both MUD and MUEPA. It clearly reflects the catalytic strength for change that JNNURM has provided and the incredible effort put in by the teams working in both ministries. Otherwise, repeal of the ULCRA, amendment of the rent control laws or reduction stamp duty rates would have been impossible to obtain. In addition, the state governments actually agreed to provide greater autonomy to ULBs and release more for them. However, as is true for many things achieved in a hurry, the quality of CDB preparation, appraisal, and the setting of performance benchmarks in the MOA have been compromised. Consequently, the really difficult issues of implementation have started to emerge. The investment proposed is unsustainable and it becomes progressively unrealistic as we move from the financially strong to the financially weak ULBs. In all 52 cities which have submitted 541 DPRs pertaining to urban infrastructure improvement, out of which 240 DPRs have been appraised, 212 projects involving an outlay of 17,660 crores have been approved for release of ACA. Again, this Government of India has committed a total assistance of 8,589 crores. By the end of March 2007, Government had released 1,621.45 crores at the rate of 25% against the amount of 1,771.40 crores, which it should have released as first installment. Under BSUP, 42 cities of 19 states submitted 225 DPRs of rupees 13,280 crore outlay, out of which 166 projects involving cost of 9,872 crores have been approved for release of JNNURM assistance. Again, this the Government of India has committed total assistance of 4,957 crores. By the end of March 2007, Government of India had released 974 crores against the first installment at the rate of 25% of rupees 1,240 crores. While the macro picture is not too bleak, closer scrutiny reveals critical flaws that jeopardize the benefits people hope to draw from the JNNURM. In the first place, JNNURM, that is the financial year 2005 to 2011, started late. It was announced on 3rd December 2005. And by the time it was announced, 9 months of the first year had lapsed, and the scheme has still not recovered from the cascading effects of this delay. In terms of the extent of funds released, the program seems to have dragged its feet. One may note that against the total of 4,000 crores budget provision in 2005-07, Government of India has released 2,595 crores, which turns out to be 65% of provision made, and a mere 5% of the total fund released to be made in 7 years. This implies that in the remaining 5 years, it will have to disperse 95% of the funds. Total budgetary provision for the current year 2007-08 is 4,127 crores, which is likely to be used up to give first installment of assistance at the rate of 25% of project cost, as adequate number of projects are in the pipeline and more will be coming from cities for approval. But even if Government of India succeeds in releasing the entire amount or even up to 5,000 crores, cumulative performance by the end of third year will be 15% against total project outlay of rupees 50,000 crores. There is inadequacy of information regarding the receipt and expenditure of JNNURM funds. The data about actual receipt of JNNURM assistance and expenditure at ground zero level, that is by ULBs and other city level implementation agencies, will be of real interest and a true indicator of progress of JNNURM. Unfortunately, no consolidated data are available about actual JNNURM assistance received by ULBs from state government or total expenditure carried out by ULBs and city level agency. There is a disconcerting evidence to show that most cities lack the capacity to use or spend the funds dispersed to them under the JNNURM. Government of India, as noted earlier, has released 2,600 crores at 25% of its share of total project costs. This means that minimum project expenditure, which theoretically should have taken place, should be 5,200 crore. But informal feedback collected from the cities which were first to embark upon JNNURM and by far most advanced in implementation indicate that at ground zero level, hardly 1,500 crores was spent by all the ULBs taken together by the end of second year. If this figure is compared to the 100,000 crores investment planned to be achieved under JNNURM, it comes out to be a mere percentage of 1.5%, which is very small. The poor quality of CDPs, CIPs and FOPs prepared and submitted by ULBs, barring some exceptions, is a matter of great concern. Comparison of APDRP and JNNURM. It may be felt by some that the comparison between APDRP and JNNURM is not relevant on various counts. First, APDRP mainly concentrated on improving efficiency, reliability, quality and financial viability of electricity distribution, while JNNURM aims at creation of urban infrastructure to improve supply of urban services in quantitative and qualitative terms. Second, JNNURM has just completed 1.5 years, while APDRP has completed its planned project period. Analysis of performance under JNNURM clearly indicates that it's suffering from some of the weaknesses which affected APDRP. The first being budget allocation, which is at the rate of 50% of annual target, and utilization of funds, which is 1.5% in 2-year period against total investment envisaged in 7 years, and 5 to 7% against annual target are very poor and low. Second, states have shown lack of interest. Those states are unwilling to undertake mandatory and optional reforms on their part and are negotiating hard with the Government of India. At present, they have participated in JNNURM process as they direly need the JNNURM funds to address their urban problems. Third, APDRP was unidimensional and more focused. In one sense, it tried to provide funds to improve electricity distribution system and tried to insensitivize loss reduction efforts, while JNNURM is attempting to provide funds to improve availability and quality of various types of urban infrastructure services, with special emphasis on providing basic services for urban poor. Infrastructure development of various kinds and diverse purposes warrant elaborate benchmark evaluation and performance monitoring. Fourth, APDRP had two components, investment and reforms. But the investment component was not contingent on reduction in A, T and C losses. Rather, it was available independently to improve distribution system of electricity, which along with service delivery improvement resulted in reduction in cash loss and provided further investment grants to state electricity boards. This is not the case with JNNURM. Investment grant is contingent on undertaking reforms and there is no incentive grant available for undertaking reforms except when the cost of reforms can be covered under the scheme. In the case of JNNURM, even though there is an urgent need to create adequate urban infrastructure, in reality it is the reforms implementation component which is most crucial. This is because most of the ULBs do not have financial, institutional and administrative capability to create and sustain additional urban infrastructure even if they get full funding, free capex from an outside source. Given the criticality of reforming ULBs, JNNURM has quite appropriately made release of funds for infrastructure investment contingent upon reform implementation. But this is a catch-22 situation for JNNURM. Will Government of India be able to hold further release of funds for infrastructure if ULBs and states fail to honour the reform commitments? Will it be able to stop costly urban infrastructure projects halfway through? Such a stance could result in a situation where neither is the urban infrastructure augmented nor the ULB reformed. On the other hand, if Government of India adopts a soft budgetary approach, then reforms will not take place, but still funds will have to be released to salvage infrastructure projects undertaken. If the government decides to release funds for infrastructure to unreformed and unready ULBs, then it will have disastrous consequences, because these institutions have been starved for funds for ages and they do not have capital absorption capacity. Unless massive capacity building efforts are undertaken simultaneously to improve their absorptive capacity, ULBs will squander the money. Thus, to summarize, PPP has been in vogue for over a decade in the country, and there exists copious literature on what constitutes PPP in terms of ownership of assets and responsibility, operation and maintenance. The APDP was a scheme with diffused focus that sought to achieve improvements in too many things at the same time: generation, transmission and distribution. Its emphasis was on inputs and projects as opposed to outcomes. APDRP is an instrument to leverage distribution reforms in the states. The JNNURM has the objective to ensure that cities generate outcome-oriented proper plans through participatory processes. Financing of the projects under the JNNURM is proposed in a manner which fulfills the JNNURM objectives and promotes PPPs in the creation of urban infrastructure. Analysis of performance under the JNNURM clearly indicates that it's suffering from some of the weaknesses which affected APDRP.